That's all of T2A. Any questions on that?
No, keep going.
Okay, here we go. VHF, UHF operating practices, single sideband phone, FM repeater simplex, frequency offsets, splits and shifts, CT CSS, DTMF, tone squelch, carrier squelch for that. I told you it'd get more technical and more fun, huh? Okay. What's the term used to describe an amateur station that's transmitting and receiving on the same frequency? That's called simplex. That's easy to remember because it's nice and simple. You're on the same frequency transmitting and receiving. Here's a diagram of it here. You have an operator here who can talk to this person, this person, this person. They can all talk to each other because they're all on the same simplex frequency. Okay? So they can all intercommunicate. What term is used to describe the use of a subaudible tone transmitted with a normal voice audio to open the squelch of a receiver? That is called CTCSS. It stands for Continuous Tone-Coded Subaudible Squelch. And the distractors on that question are carrier squelch, which is not using a tone at all, tone burst, which is a short tone at the beginning of the transmission, and DTMF, which is touch tone, like the buttons on your telephone. Okay? So the tone, right here in the question, tone, there's your T right there for tone, and there is subaudible right there, and here's the S for subaudible. Okay? So that's the key to that question if you should happen to get it on your test. Subaudible tone, CTCSS. Okay, which of the following describes the muting of receiver audio controlled solely by the presence or absence of an RF signal? RF means radio frequency, and it's called carrier squelch. If we did not have squelch circuits on our receivers, we'd have to listen to the radio sitting there roaring the whole time while we were waiting for a signal. So we have a squelch circuit there that quiets the radio except when it receives a signal, a radio frequency signal. And when it receives that carrier of the radio frequency signal, then it opens up the receiver so we can hear, and that's called carrier squelch. Okay. What common problem causes you to be able to hear but not access a repeater even when transmitting with the proper offset? Okay. So you have your radio set up with the correct offset for the repeater, and you can hear the repeater, but you're not able to transmit through it. Here are what the problems may be. It may be that the repeater receiver requires an audio tone burst for access, or that the repeater receiver requires a CTCSS tone for access, or the repeater receiver may require a DCS tone, which is digitally coded squelch tone sequence for access. All of these are correct. And you'll remember I mentioned that at the time you program your radio for the repeater, you'll also include that tone, the CTCSS tone, to open the repeater if that's necessary for that repeater. So all of these choices are correct. Okay, what determines the amount of deviation of an FM signal? The amplitude or the strength of the modulating signal controls the amount of deviation. What happens when the deviation of an FM transmitter is increased? Its signal occupies more bandwidth. The signal becomes broader in frequency when you increase the deviation. What should you do if you receive a report that your station's transmissions are causing splatter or interference on nearby frequencies? You should check your transmitter for off-frequency operation or for spurious emissions. Transmitters generate signals other than the ones you intend for them to. Generally, those are well suppressed in the transmitter, but in some cases they may not be. So you should check for those things if you do get reports of splatter or interference. And you're probably going to start out operating with 2-meter FM, and generally there's not too much problem with this on 2-meter FM. What's the proper course of action if your station's transmission unintentionally interferes with another station? Correct thing to do is to properly identify your transmission and move to a different frequency. Which of the following methods is encouraged by the FCC when identifying your station when using phone? One of the things I had you print out, Elsie, was the phonetic alphabet, the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, Echo thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you do not need to learn all of those, but you should learn at least enough that you can say your call sign phonetically. So you'll be doing Whiskey Alpha, or Whiskey Hotel 7, or Whiskey Hotel 6, and then whatever the rest of your call sign is. You should know the phonetics for that. And it's useful to have that handy. If everybody uses the same phonetics, it makes it much easier to communicate, especially if signal conditions are poor. So you don't need to learn the alphabet, unless you, at least not for this test. To be a good communicator, you may want to, but for the test you don't need to learn it. But learn at least enough to say your call sign phonetically. Okay, what's a Q signal? What's the Q signal used to indicate that you're receiving interference from another station? This is another sheet, that two-sided one that I had you print. And there's a whole bunch of Q signals. These go back to the early days of telegraph, and they're shorthand for various things you can see there. And there are a bunch of them. Only 2 of them appear on the technician test, and you may have one or the other, or neither, but you should know these 2. QRM is one of them. QSY is the other one. Now, Q signals come in 2 flavors. They come as either questions or statements, and you can see that on the sheet. If I have QRM question mark, it means are you being interfered with? And if I say QRM without the question mark, it means I am being interfered with. Okay? So QRM refers to interference from other stations. The other Q signal that could be on your test is QSY, which refers to frequency change. QSY question mark would be, should I change frequency? QSY without the question mark should be change frequency, or I am changing frequency. And we sometimes use these in speech, too. I can say I'm going to QSY to 146.52, which means I'm going to change frequency to the frequency that I just said. And hopefully the person on the other end would know what that meant. Okay, any questions on those?
No, that's good.
That's good.